first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes, so I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion, any changes to the minutes?
I did read them, they were
Okay,
accurate.
okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye, okay. The next item up, I wanted to pull something up as reference for this one, is the general wage increase for the unaffiliated. So Mark and I had a discussion this week. They're not attached in here though, are they?
On the back,
Oh, okay, thank you.
back and front.
Thank you. I brought my own copy, but so over the past few years, it's part of the charter basically that the Board of Selectmen is supposed to review and approve the general wage increase. And so I've talked to Mark, and the budget, this gets budgeted in our budget every year in advance of approval usually comes after the budget session. So one of the things we talked about was making sure that we do this during the budget process. And I don't know why we haven't done it that way. Eric, you might have an answer to that?
I have no answer for that.
Okay.
Yeah, but
It makes sense, right? Like, cause we're approving it after it's been approved, it's been budgeted. So because we've been doing this traditionally and the charter states that we should be reviewing it, I wanted to do it this one time, and then next year we would set up as part of the budget discussion, going over the general wage increase and the percentage increase, okay? So what you see before is Mark, do you wanna give a background on why we're giving what we're giving and
Totally agree with what you said, Wendy, thanks for the opportunity. I think that as you and I talked about, because I had only started in January, and obviously wasn't in a position to review the past performance for everybody for the entire year. We looked at what Board of Ed was giving their folks and what this board and the full Board of Selectmen had approved for the 1-year deal for CSEA, and we settled on a 3% across the board. I think just full disclosure, subsequent to that budgeting decision, I think it was determined that the Board of Ed was at 2.9. I didn't see fit to lower ours at that point because we'd already begun the process of budgeting and performance reviews and so forth. So what you've got before you is at 3% across the board. Just wanted to take a second, if I can, Wendy, to talk about what we hope will change in this process next year. Number one, as you mentioned, moving it to be incorporated into the budget just makes a lot of sense. That's when we're discussing all the money, that's where the opportunity lies for the board to weigh in, I think, on this. I'm not sure why it was separated and put post-budget approval. That's unusual in municipalities in my experience, so that's number one. Number two is, and you've seen the draft report from GovHR, there's a couple lines in there that I'll draw your attention to regarding raises, and particularly I think they call it, I don't have the report in front of me, but I think it's a hybrid or a combined approach where some portion of the annual raise opportunity is based on performance and meeting specific objectives, right? So there's been, I think, some discussions amongst you, the Board of Selectmen, and I think also probably the Board of Finance about shifting to a performance-based system. My understanding is that in the past, the previous town manager was, not necessarily consistent on this, but what I plan on doing as part of my next budget cycle, asking the Board of Selectmen to approve a reasonable and appropriate amount of money to be distributed to department heads and potentially all unaffiliateds on a merit-based program that we're designing now. So what employees, unaffiliated, non-bargaining group employees would be eligible for is the COLA piece, which is, whatever that is. It could be 0, it could be 2, in this case it's 3. And then a performance-based pot of money that we can distribute based on performance, and particularly not so much job performance as, we're challenging department heads particularly to think out of the box, come up with innovative cost savings and efficiencies ideas and so forth. You'll see some of this as we talk about the town manager goals later. So while we're doing this year this way out of respect for the past practice, my own view is that an annual performance review is, I wouldn't say it's meaningless, but it should be tied in some way to the compensation, the potential for additional money. So what you'll see in next year's budget is the COLA and then a separate line for performance-based measurement, however we frame that. I think, and Wendy, I think you and I talked about this, it goes to one of the Board of Selectmen goals too about transparency. One of the problems with having done it this way in the past after the budget is it deprives the public of any opportunity for public comment about GWI. So that's, and along those lines, I think it's important for the public and for our electeds to understand, well, we set specific goals for specific departments and they met them or they exceeded them or they didn't meet them. And that's something that as part of your budgetary authority, if you grant my request in the budget next year to do this, it puts in your purview the ability to kind of review that, right? Because that doesn't exist now. So contrary to, initial perceptions that, we want to push back and control this process, that's not the case at all. We actually want to carve a way where in partnership between the legislative branch and the administrative branch, we can all be transparent to the public and reach these decisions together. So I don't think you'll ever see again from me a raise for unaffiliateds that is exactly the same across the organization, right? So that's what you see this year. And then one more comment on that, Wendy. So we've begun performance reviews with department heads, and department heads are reviewing their folks. And again, it's not a retrospective review as would normally be the case. It's more of a prospective, forward-looking. These are the things we're looking to achieve over the next year. But what I've told, and we're about halfway through this process, what I've told them is that this is my plan. It's subject to budgetary and Board of Selectmen approval. So we're not in a position to tell department heads and unaffiliated that there will be some bonus opportunity over and above the COLA until you approve it, and that's not going to happen until the budget process. So we will be reviewing and discussing this with all of the department heads again as we get into budget in January. So really kind of at the 6-month mark, we'll know. And Wendy, maybe we can have further discussions in personnel firm this up, because if you signal your agreement with that approach, it'll help me get ahead of that and maybe not wait until January or February to let people know. So that's all I have.
What's the difference in the dollar amount roughly with creating the pool versus how it's working now?
Well, let's say the COLA is what the COLA is, and so that number comes from finance generally. I didn't change it. It was 3 was kind of penciled in there from the beginning, and really the only decision-making process I took was, are we going to reduce it? We're certainly not going to increase it because that's what the number is. But so in consultation with finance and with what Matt was doing on the Board of Ed side and what the chair of the Board of Finance had indicated COLA was and everything else, we landed at the 3. I think what you'll see in the next budget from me, Heather, is a pool of money, and I can pick a number, 50,000, 40,000, whatever it might be, subject to your approval, that would be divided and awarded to the appropriate employee based on performance. So there's got to be some pool of money. We haven't decided what that.
So I want to add on to your question, because I have the same question. So to me, you would have to reduce the percentage across the board in order to create this merit pool. Because otherwise we're giving more money out.
I wouldn't say so. I mean, that may be one way of looking at a multifaceted situation, but it's really a distinction without a difference. The pool of money for raises is whatever you approve it to be. How we characterize it and how we divide it is really an administrative function.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, so let's say, because I'm thinking my corporate experience, right? You only get a pool and you give people less. We didn't get COLA every year. We got whatever, the 1 point whatever. as a going rate, right? And so let's say we have a 3% COLA this year, let's use this year as an example. Wouldn't we take that 3% pool, the total, and then give maybe less and move the more to people? You know, if you're saying there's a merit, no, we have to talk further about this, but the pool is the pool. If you're saying we're gonna have a merit piece to the pool, then you're kind of saying you might have a 3.5% pool. Are you saying you'd stick to the COLA pool and divvy it up, you know, equitably as far as performance?
No. This is the problem with the two phases and why GovHR calls this a hybrid, because you either have a pool of money to fund the COLA, it's driven by what the COLA is. You know, if the COLA is 3, then hopefully the board's approved 3. Otherwise, your classification schedule gets out of whack, as ours has and other communities have over the years, if you're not keeping pace with the marketplace, and that's what COLA does. Separate from that is performance-based measurement and incentive for employees that's more commonly found in the private sector and very rarely found in the governmental sector, right? This hybrid approach says COLAs are whatever the board approves based on, BLS and Board of Finance and everybody else's assessment and what our peers are doing, and that's what it is. You would not take that pool of money and divide it amongst the staff by performance, because COLA is related to cost of living increases, and that's what it is. If you do that, you're gonna be out of whack within years and you won't be competitive in the marketplace. And all the work we did with GovHR will have been essentially for naught 3 or 4 or 5 years from now. It goes to one of your earlier questions, Wendy, if you're giving somebody a GWI who is at the max, you have to raise the max. And that's the problem that I know you have raised in the past, and it's a problem that everybody wrestles with, because the ranges are critical, and maintaining the ranges is maintaining the classification study, and municipalities do it maybe every 10 years or so, maybe every 5, but you've got to continue to increase that max, otherwise you have people that will leave. And you'll lose your most senior people who could get a 15% raise by shifting to the next town over. So I hope that answers the question. I think that what we want to see is drive exceptional performance among our staff that's unrelated to the COLA. The question is, and we don't have a recommendation yet, we're still working through this, and as you know, the GovHR report's not final yet. We want to have some conversations with them, and Eric will be looking at this with Amy. What is the amount of money? And that really isn't the point for today, what it is, but I wouldn't characterize it, Wendy, as being more. It's just a question of whether or not we want to move to performance-based measurement.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna, it's what in my head, right? I do like performance-based measurement, right, as long as we did that last year, kind of, right? There was adjustments made. But what I'm saying is, instead of 3% to everybody, right, it might be 2.7% to everybody, and then you have that 0.03 whatever pool for your merit to spread evenly, so that the amount, we're not giving more every year in salary, right? Like, and I'm not trying to, but I'm just saying.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
I'm just trying to say that, if we keep adding the COLA and then we keep adding a performance-based pool, then our budget is just gonna keep increasing way over COLA. So there has to be a happy medium.
Let me clarify one quick thing before Stephen goes. The incentive pay doesn't have to be salary. It can be a stipend or an incentive. The benefit of that is that it's not cumulative to future raises, number one. Number two, it may or may not be pensionable depending on our pension plan, and I defer to Eric on that. But the award of a performance-based stipend is different from the award of an additional 0.4% on top of your COLA, because it becomes, that's definitely pensionable and it's cumulative to all the other raises. So the proposal that you'll see, and again, these are early days, we wanna get out in front of this, and we wanna give the board, ample time to weigh in and give us, good feedback on this, but I see it right now today as more of a stipend.
So I utilize performance-based measurements myself in my businesses. That being said, they have the propensity over years to be, you want to reward everyone because you don't want anyone to feel cheated. what I might propose, and this is just a proposal, like you said, we're just in a brainstorming session or status, is specific awards. One for saving the town money, and you get just a random number out of my off the top of my head, $5,000. You know what I mean? You save the town 10,000, you get 5,000. We're up 5. That to me is how it would self-fund. Other, awards would be specific in nature, and that would keep it from being diminutive in that you want to be in future. I'm not saying the first years, of course, we'll run it stringently and it'll be utilized correctly, but as it gets muddied down over the years, I just see years, 20 years out where it's split by the number of department heads, because everybody wants everyone to be happy and feel that they are keeping up with the pack, because they want to be nice. If we have specific awards, say somewhere between 3 to 5 of them, that's enough of them that there's a fair share to go around, that people feel recognized. And it also makes it a recognition. Whereas if you have a pool, not that I'm pooping on it, I'd still love to hear discussion on it. If you have a pool, yeah, you're recognized, but it's not like a status recognition that you won the award this year. You are a participant this year. And a participant award is just never equal to a truly earned reward. So that's just something I might throw out there, that we could come up with a hybrid of your hybrid. Partially fund at least part of it with a component that at least one award is based on a measurable savings to the town.
Right. I agree, Steve. I think obviously, I actually like that approach very much. I think that as we're sort of fleshing this out, my own initial thoughts were that you provide, particularly the department heads, with the rubric against which they'd be measured for that incentive. That's not to say that this is their baseline performance, but within these categories, one of them is fiscal, obviously, the number one thing would be operate within your budget and exceed revenue or reduce expense. Some metric that would be letter A, if you would. But we're also, I think, trying to drive less tangible innovation. It's easy in the business world to just look at the bottom line and say, okay, employee X saved us dollars. But in order for us to really succeed, if, as you say, over the next 10, 20 years as an organization, we've got to drive innovation. And early stages of innovation are particularly difficult to quantify in terms of a bottom line, because there's often a break-even point that is years in the future. Like, for example, the board approved a change to the Axion PD body cams that Heather and I and the chief worked on. And the savings is de minimis in year one, but over the life of that contract, it was like 600,000 or 700,000 or something like that made it clear that you want to do that. We did that because I had done it in Poughkeepsie, and the chief had been in touch with Axon, and so it was right in front of us, and we took that opportunity. What this program hopefully will do is drive that level of thinking about innovation that can span multiple years, as opposed to somewhat of a one-dimensional, can I save 100,000 in paving, or can I, merge 2 boards and save, and we'd have essentially an employee suggestion box, that we'd have to go through and then award. And what you've done with that, I think, in my view, at least initially, is you got a lot of disappointed people. You're right that you don't want this to be diluted to, we've got to give somebody a little bit of everything, in which case Wendy's point becomes accurate. It's not a 3, it's a 3.22 or whatever. So I'm aware of that. I would just say that Steve, your point about it being diluted over the years respectfully isn't my problem. It would be the problem of the future personnel subcommittee and board of selectmen to hold your future town manager to account for using this program in the way it was designed. We can't put ourselves in the position of our replacements years down the road, right? I'm the type of town manager that I think has a propensity more for innovation, and sometimes you can't quantify that. And that's the problem, In the performance reviews I've had so far, and I just want to say for the record that I'm extremely pleased with the performance of staff here in the town. I've inherited a really, really strong team. And so I've used these meetings to again, look forward. And one of the key things we're talking about is more cross collaborations, more working through the organization instead of working in silos in your area, and breaking down what barriers may still exist between unaffiliated employees, staying completely in their lane. To be candid, I don't particularly need everybody to stay in their lane, because the whole organization is gonna be improved if you take, and I'll just pick an employee, you take Mr. Roy and his, extensive experience throughout the organization over however many years he's been here, and you say to him, I don't have any problem with you stepping outside your lane if you see something else that, even if it isn't in the Department of Public Works, would be beneficial to the organization. And I'm telling other department heads the same thing, so that nobody has pride of ownership. And there are, on the negative side, there may very well be some silos that could benefit from that approach, right? So it's more cross collaborations looking forward.
Yeah, cause I want you to
Yeah.
move on to
So I'll keep
the
it
next
short.
question.
I still have my perspective, because what you're saying is give them a little bit as they move towards a long range goal. That to me is getting your COLA. You're doing your job to move forward. You have goals within your job. And part of them is to research opportunities. What you're talking about is what my fear is. They're gonna get a little bit every year. So what's the prize? An award doesn't have to be designated to one person. I'm not going with that straight approach.
Right.
I'm saying if the team, whoever composes these teams, win it, they get it. If it takes them 3 years to get the award, then the theory that I'm hoping for is working. I don't envision everyone winning an award every year, because again, that diffuses the award appreciation.
Totally get it.
Also, I think there should be a component, and I'll finish up here, that is non-financial. It could be something, and people always snicker at things like this, but they carry weight with the staff. A beneficial parking spot, the front parking spot. That can be an award and make it some sort of transportation award. It doesn't have to be financial things that we come up with. Talk about thinking outside of the box. That's another way to think outside of the box, is to give little acknowledgements that cost the town little to no money. However, carry the, for lack of a better word, prestige among your peers that you did something and you're being acknowledged for it. So that's my piece on it, but I still think the more targeted awards will yield more targeted results.
Okay,
Um,
which is.
And the other thing, I think that when you were saying it's up to the board and the personnel subcommittee, to kind of hold the town manager, to this, but we change boards every 2 years, and I've seen over the past few years that we get something in place, the institutional knowledge isn't there, everyone's forgotten. I mean, it came up with the pilot social worker, and have we not remembered that that was a trial position, that position was in the budget. So I just think that this would really need to be written up and just put together in a way that we don't need to rely on, this person has been on the board for the past 4 years and they're bringing the memory of it. We need to really have something in place.
Right.
And certain criteria and things that doesn't cause this to
Erode.
yes.
I got you. That makes perfect sense.
Can I
Heather.
wrap this section up, so I have other questions. I think the best way to move forward is when we get to where we're gonna start looking at salaries next year. You have a proposal on
Yeah,
what the percentage should be, what you're thinking the percentage is. And you come to us with kind of a proposal on how you're going to implement that, right?
Sure.
So that
Yeah.
let's say the COLA, again, let's say it's 3%. And what we're saying is maybe everybody doesn't deserve 3%. We're giving it to everybody, but if somebody's performing at this level and somebody's performing exceeding expectations, going to corporate thing, this person would get more of the pot than this person.
Then it's
right.
not a COLA though, that's part of the.
Well, again, the COLA, do we always give COLA? I guess this is the question.
If you're, you, let's compare it to your bargaining groups. you've negotiated essentially a COLA for a 3 or 4 year contract, right? Unaffiliateds don't have the benefit of and the clarity of
Right.
knowing what those raises are gonna be 2, 3, 4 years into the future, right? The town also, and not just this town, but other towns are notoriously behind the curve relative to their peers in the marketplace, and that's why they have to do classification studies and implement changes every 5 or 10 years because of the widening gap. Unaffiliated employees are more vulnerable to board cuts because it's not politically palatable to give somebody a 3 or 3.2 or whatever, and that's just the way it is. But a COLA by its definition, it gets to everybody. And if you've got a poor performing employee, the way to manage that is through the management process, writing them up, progressive discipline all the way through and including hopefully not termination. It isn't the way to manage staff by withholding cost of living increases in order to punish them for being bad, because here's the thing about that. You obviously never wrote them up. You know, you do a performance review once a year, but that's not, building them, that's not employee development by any means. That's almost, I don't know what the word is, but under your example, Wendy, you've got employees that are suboptimal and we're not gonna give you 3, even though we're calling it a COLA. The way to do it is to exclude them from the merit part, but not the COLA. And so I would say you wouldn't wanna reduce your COLA so that you can say, well, this is the pool of money, however you divide it, because then what you've done is you've said to all of your unaffiliated, your COLA is a little lower because we bought into the town manager's plan of putting some portion of it into the performance based. And that's just a circuitous way of kind of hitting somebody who didn't perform well. But it relieves management of the obligation to tell the employee why they're not performing well and to work with them to improve their performance. And so much of this is complex, we could spend a lot of time on it, but really you've got a COLA with performance stipends, or you've just got a COLA. But my view is a COLA is distributed evenly. It's not used as a tool to harm the folks that have not performed as well as the others.
Okay, and that, I guess that's for future discussion, just because I've been on this committee since 2019, I guess, this is my 5th year. And it's the general wage, I don't recall the general wage increase that we've been giving always in line with COLA. I could be wrong, but I don't see COLA in any of the, the past documentation that the DWI is tied to COLA. So that's just my questioning. I know in a corporate world, everybody doesn't always get a cost of living adjustment to what the COLA is. You get a pool of money that the company wants to distribute for salaries and increases, fair or not fair, right? So in government, we are fairer, I think, in making sure that our employees are taken care of. So I think when we revisit that, we need to look at what the actual numbers are. What are our peers, what are our peers giving? Are they all giving COLA? Which in that case, if everybody's giving COLA, then we would have to give COLA to not lose employees if they're in the same 50th percentile.
That is the case.
So that was the other, I had this question, what is is the CCM average increase this year 3% across all?
I don't have it in front of me, I think it was slightly less than 3%.
Okay.
But to your earlier point, and again, compare unaffiliated to bargaining group, that, if you negotiate 2.5, 2.5, 3, 3, those are COLAs. And they are distributed to every employee equally, right? There is no merit or performance.
No,
But with management, and the whole point of being in management is to not be in the union and be subject to collective bargaining. And the whole benefit of a management class of employees is that you don't need to negotiate with them as a group. You can reward exceptional performance, and we are not doing that.
I agree with you. I'm just saying, what's the pool of money is what we need to figure out.
We don't know. We could be talking about.
That's the question next year.
Right.
What's the pool of money? Is it COLA plus 2% so that every year our salary bucket is gonna continue to go up? So that's the question, and I think that will have to
Yep.
And I like the merit option, I do agree with rewarding, but you still can't just keep expanding the
Absolutely.
salary pool.
Right.
On top of the COLA every year, is that what you're thinking? So, and I hear Steve's idea, and I don't know how that works, but I think that's something
That's a good idea.
we should look at, but I do like the idea of rewarding for merit as long as we're not overextending ourselves every year.
Terrific, okay, thank you very much.
What is the reason
Yeah.
the Board of Education compensates
yeah.
30%
Yeah.
of those two positions
that
and not
question.
50?
Yeah, well, right, so
It's the same question. No, I'm good, that was a perfect question.
it's the best
It's a great
question.
question.
It really is. I gotta choose my words wisely. I think that what we need to do as part of next year's budget cycle, with all respect to our colleagues on the board side, is take a look at because this isn't the only one. Look at shared services, and I mean, we always look for new ones, but I don't know that there's been a deep dive into the existing negotiated relationships across the budget and the organization. I'm not ready to say we can get that work done with everything else we have on our plate, but I think with respect to the 30, it needs to be at least 40 in my view, right, based on what I know the finance and budget directors are doing. And particularly, as you'll see when we talk about my goals, one of them is to and again, kind of, it goes back to what I'm trying to coach our department heads to do, be okay about getting out of your lane a little bit. The same thing goes for me. In the past, the town manager was over here and the superintendent of schools was over there, and they met for lunch once a month and whatever. I think that notwithstanding the wonderful job that Amy and Melissa are doing in those two shared roles, the Board of Ed needs help. The education side of town government needs help. And if you've got the talent in the building in the form of this particular town manager when it comes to budgeting and efficiencies and government restructuring, Matt would welcome that help. I've had those conversations with him, and so you'll see there's a line in one of my goals that is, again, outside the box. Town manager wouldn't step into that. But you were presented with one such opportunity in executive session the other night, and there may be others. And so no idea is a bad idea. It doesn't matter where the idea comes from. We don't own our respective positions, and so that's the answer. But I think, Heather, it needs to be 40. I wouldn't say it needs to be 50.
So, yeah, I mean, when you look at it in general, the amount that the taxpayer's paying is the same. So wherever we can find with shared services and efficiencies, some sort of savings or, that's great for the taxpayer, but at the same time, the little bit of scope creep that feels like
It is
that
creep.
happens,
Every
out
year.
of what we have to work with versus the Board of Ed and us taking on more and more Board of Ed things. That's just something that I think about.
I appreciate that comment. You're hearing about that from a couple of the Board of Finance members as well. If you listen carefully to some of those, there's a couple of them that have that concern, and potentially the whole board, but you're absolutely right. In my budget message, which you read between the lines, there is a sentence in there about the percentage of the overall budget between the board side and the municipal side, and Chair Hebner and I have had this conversation too. Is there creep, up from 75-25 to eventually 80-20, and in rising costs, the pressure on the municipal side becomes unsustainable. It's not that we don't want to do more and collaboratively, and we're not trying to pull money here. As you said, Heather, it's the same tax bill to your constituents. But fundamentally, there's a fairness issue here if the municipal side is getting squeezed. And it's not just on the operating side, it's on the capital side as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think your board raised the question of, well, if we do certain things, what are they willing to give up over here? In the past, that would have been a discussion for the Board of Finance perhaps, or the Board of Education. I encourage the Board of Selectmen to also, just like I tell department heads and myself, get out of your lane a little bit, because you're the chief policy board for the town. And if you hear respectfully that another board or commission is doing this, that, or the other thing, hope you knew about it well in advance, because fundamentally you're the chief legislative body, notwithstanding the fact that those boards have their own purview and their own authority. that's where, we're looking for, and one of my goals you'll see later is cross collaboration and more strategic planning amongst boards and commissions. That's a little out of the lane for a town manager, but when you're looking for organizational change and organizational management, you don't peel back a piece of the organization and say, Mr. Town Manager, go do this, and expect us to just do this while all around us the building could be on fire, right? The whole organization is important. And that's a little bit of a subtle shift, but it's gonna be important to the town because otherwise your hopes to mitigate education costs rising, which we know are happening, your hopes to mitigate that rest solely with 2 or 3 people on a board of education. You can't let that happen, I think, and I don't think others would want you to. The right approach for all senior management and all members of boards and commissions is to welcome help and guidance from all of us, and that's what we're doing with EDC, working with Mains, all these things you're starting to see that global approach. And I will get to goals later. I wanna hear feedback from you on whether that's a worthwhile approach or not, because there's certainly enough things to do without trying to broaden what we're trying to achieve, so.
Okay, I do want to just tack on to Heather's question, cause I wrote the same thing down. But I did want to tack on is that we did all with comp, I'm gonna kind of cross the comp and classification study, some of that into the GWI discussion, there's a few overlapping things. But one of them is this 30%. We did these surveys and we did reclassify all these positions, so we know how much effort is spent on Board of Ed, I would hope, in those responses, right? The deputy, the budget director, the finance director, didn't we look at those positions in this comp and classification study? So we can kind of judge how much effort is being attributed to Board of Ed in those descriptions, right? Which could help determine the percentage. Is that true?
I'll defer to Eric on it. Certainly the JAQs that were distributed to everybody were completed, and so that information is there.
Right.
But remember what Rachel said at the presentation Monday night, and that was that in terms of the interviews and the deep dive, GovHR tried to, they only interviewed one person from each class and they focused on the classes that had the most people. So it is possible, and I don't have the GovHR report with me, but Eric could speak to this, I think, that they didn't take a deep dive at say the finance director position. One of my questions, in fact, which I didn't get to ask Monday night, and I will talk to Rachel about it, is on the report they don't show whether the other peer towns' finance directors were shared or not.
That was a question I
They needed
had
to
too.
asterisk that because I can't tell. It looks like we're an outlier on a couple of these things, and that may be because it's shared. But I still think fundamentally Heather is right. It's not just what percentage of the individual's work is spent between the two. It's also a bit of a negotiation, right? So I think 30 just seems to me to be low based on what I know, but
what did the comment you just made,
Yep.
Yeah, I do wanna know that, how many, cause we are an outlier as far as the salaries go for that position. In comparison to others, we're over 75 percentile in the comp and classification study. So I think we do need to know how many municipalities share that position. So are we comparing apples to oranges, or are we really over what people are paid, or are we good for what, you know what I'm saying? There was no indication of that in the study. And to Mark, that's a great question.
Yeah, that would be great to
I might
share
even,
that answer
I might
with
even
us.
ask them to go and expand their work a little bit, but and go find me 4 communities that are shared,
Yeah,
right?
and what's this, yeah,
But we wanted to wait to do that until the board got us comments on the draft report, because we assumed there'd be some things that you wanted to see in addition to the ones that I wanna see. So we only have room to ask him for one more revision, and then you'd be presented with a final draft, so.
well,
So-
yeah.
Is the, Rachel indicated that we would have 1 year of implementation service with them. When does that clock start?
I'll defer to the HR director. I don't,
Yeah,
it's a good question.
Yeah, that's good, thank you.
Yeah, and so first thing, I think GovHR is flexible in terms of when that year starts. But as soon as the final study is released, my expectation is that's when the clock is gonna start ticking. I don't think that, because we talked about the 8 to 12 additional weeks for job descriptions, that's not really gonna have bearing in terms of what we do with market analysis going forward.
Right.
So I think that's gonna be the answer. Probably gonna be beginning August through next August.
But well through the budget process, which is really
Yes.
what's important.
Can I add on to that? Oh, but I guess, and you heard this the other night, I still feel like it was so focused on salary and not total compensation. To me, that was what the goal of the whole project was. So if we don't feel like they deliver that, how do we make that happen?
It's not a matter they're not delivering it. I think we're getting ahead of what there's we're still in process.
Okay.
It's part of the process. You can't get to the total comp until you deal with you gotta take these in phases. Phase 1 is classification, phase 2 is compensation.
Okay,
Now you go total compensation.
okay.
We're really we're in the second phase of that.
Okay, it's just that it sounded like we only have limited time for one more review, and if we didn't see what we expected in this second to final review, how do we know? That's my concern.
And we will certainly have, I think you'll be pleased with the final product.
Okay,
A lot of the data that you haven't seen that's been presented, the data behind the data, is most of the questions you're asking is already there. Even down to the questions you're asking about shared services. I need to go look at for each of those interviews they held with those individuals. They went through 20-25 minute interviews, and we have real detailed points that what came out of those interviews, which will probably get the answers to what you're looking for this percentage of time with already there. So they're doing the legwork on for total comp, you know, the things I'm not gonna go back over, but the key measurements that you're looking for total comp. The thing that's the lag right now that we're seeing is within the pension piece of it, which is critical. So where we're at right now is that of all our neighboring communities, our comparable communities, we've gotten a response from one on the pension piece. So we're really trying to work with those communities to get those answers. So that's the last piece that we really need to work on, and then what you can expect is you'll have a very clear understanding for the majority of those organizations, exactly where we fall comparatively, where they are, where we are comparatively high, low, medium in terms of where we fall within the spectrum of comparable benefits. And we just need a little more time to get that together.
I just wanna make sure you're on the same page with Rachel, because she was dismissive of the benefits and stated something along the lines of, they're all really similar. And when you looked at the supporting documents, you could actually see a wide variance in what different people, and it's all over the place. So it does need to be brought into a line that you can view. But Rachel made that statement during the presentation that the benefits, don't worry about them, because pretty much everyone does about the same. It was in that presentation.
And I think we are certainly on the same page.
Okay.
We speak with Rachel several times a week. We have very good collaborative conversations about the direction and what we're looking to accomplish. She has a very clear understanding, and we're in agreement in terms of what we're looking to produce. As I think what she was talking about was when you look at what you're trying to measure for total compensation is in line with what most communities are doing. We are all offering a deferred comp plan. We are all offering life insurance. So I think that's what she was saying.
That makes it more comparable than, easier to
Yeah.
compare.
So when she says we're all pretty much the same, yeah, we're all pretty, and remember, we've been following these communities, we've all been following each other for years. And one of the things that was really that we were proud of that came out, I think I might have mentioned this in the past, is we've been using our comparable communities based on organically what we consider them to be, but we've never had a true agency come in and say you're doing the right thing. It validated that pretty much we've been looking at in the right places, so that was great to understand. So you're looking at 15-20 years of us keeping an eye on each other to match up our benefits. So yeah, for the most part, I think you're gonna find that we're gonna be pretty comparable with regards to what we offer. I think what we're gonna find, some of the dissimilarities are gonna come in percentages, for instance, on defined contribution plans.
That's exactly my
Yeah.
concern, so.
Yeah,
Glad to hear
and
that.
you will see that line by line per organization, exactly where we fall.
And just two quick things here, cause it just came to me, but and I don't think I'm speaking out of school, but I got an email request to fill out a JAQ for GovHR for the town of Avon. So it appears to me from yesterday's email that Avon just recruited and were engaged GovHR to do a classification study, so we're a little ahead of our neighboring town. But the second thing I'd say is that, again, looking at two groups, the unionized employees and management. With respect to union employees, there's a self-correcting feature of the marketplace with them because you're negotiating contracts and the union leadership always knows what everybody else has gotten. And so, like we're in negotiations with police, they come in, they put, 30 things on the table and they say, well, Avon does this, Canton does, they do their homework as well, and then we go and we verify that, and often that is, most of the time that's true. So there's that self-correction, but with respect to unaffiliated, there isn't. And we always tend to think that, well, management, they make more money, they're this, they're that. But with respect to benefits and pay scales, I've seen the pay scales for non-bargaining group get out of whack much faster than those that are collectively bargained every 3 to 4 years. So just something to keep in mind. I think you would probably find, Steve, that with respect to benefits, it's the unaffiliated. Like I would ask GovHR, okay, great, you finally came back with the benefit piece that we're really interested in. And I'd like to see it divided between bargaining group employees and not, because what I'm really interested in is the management piece. We have an opportunity to negotiate with our with labor every 3 to 4 years typically, but where there's creep is on the management side. And where there's failure to creep, that's why some communities say management gets the biggest COLA of that the bargaining groups are given. And sometimes even with respect to town managers' salaries, boards tie it to the raises that other groups get, because otherwise, like we have the authority to cut management salaries if the board wanted to do it, or not give management a COLA at all. Could do that. Can't do that with the collective bargaining groups. The only real advantage to non-bargaining group employees is that they could get a performance kicker, and that they obviously earn more per hour because of their position. So anyway, I know we're a little behind on time, but you did actually get transitioned to GovHR. I just wanna wrap up
Yeah, the salary, the GWI. So I did have a couple more questions.
Sure.
And some of them came up in the past. And this also goes into the it's hard to separate the two, really.
Yeah.
The one thing that I've raised before, which I just find kind of mind-boggling, I guess, is that the salary ranges. Like every year, because of COLA, we just shift the whole salary range up. And what you were saying before is if somebody's at the max and then they're at the max of the salary range, you have to expand the salary range. Why aren't salary ranges broad enough to cover, the future of some sort and have a midpoint? Because when I look at these, and I don't wanna take a lot of time in this, but when I look at these and then I look at where people are, if somebody's new in a job, right, and again, I always prefer to go back to corporate, and you were corporate for a while. When someone's new in a job, they're usually from the minimum to the midpoint, right? And then as you move up and you get closer to the maximum, you usually are looking at a promotion potentially, or you're just gonna get smaller and smaller increases to keep you within that grade. So the question I have is, and this is more for GovHR, why aren't there midpoints so we can actually see where somebody falls in the range instead of having to do the calculation? So we know where they're moving, and we know the years of experience actually that a person has too. It's just, and why do we keep moving the maximum just because that's what the range is? Why isn't there just a maximum out there? That's just the theoretical question.
Could be. Here, I'll defer to you on one thing. In an ideal world, you would do exactly that. You'd have a range that would be for new employees.
In a position.
In a position, there are ranges for the benefit of hiring them. Where are you gonna start them on the range? And this is a range, so when you put out a job posting, there's a range for the position, right? But where I think we differ is that inflationary effects and the need to give all employees a cost of living is a function of every business, whether it's private or municipal. And if you don't do that, you will be gradually out of whack. You will disincent your management employees because you've got collective bargaining agreements with everybody else. So your top echelon leadership and management employees are the ones that are being disincented because they're at the max. And the other last thing I'd say is that in municipal government, I think certainly in Poughkeepsie anyway, the average length of service was 14 years. It was extraordinary. So among almost 400 employees, the mean was something like 11 years. It was absolutely amazing. I don't know what it is here. It'd be interesting to look at that. But in government, because of the benefits and the pension, people tend to stay a lot longer. Under your theory, you've got an employee who's been here 20 years, they wouldn't get a raise for the next 5 years or until you adjusted the ranges. The charter actually says, which we've discussed, that the board's gotta look at this every year. Not the individual salaries, but the ranges. And I don't think you've done that. I mean, I defer to you on this.
Right, that's exactly what I was gonna say, that, you know, we've lived in a stagnant system for so long,
Yeah.
right? And I was even confused a bit when I kept seeing these maximum ranges, because I said, okay, well, year on year, where's the shift? And the problem is that we've just never evaluated and kept up with it. So one of the things that we will certainly be, and it gets a little more complicated, but one of the things we'll certainly be doing moving forward is, we spoke the other night about annual comp seasons. We need to have we need every year to go out and see where that minimum maximum is actually shifting. And we'd be unrealistic to think that minimum maximums stay stagnant in any given year, right? They're always gonna move up. What our responsibility to bring to you is gonna be is to tell you where exactly that dial is in the upcoming year.
Okay.
So that's what we'll be working on. And then it gets a little more complicated. There's a number of things that get injected in that. I know that the board back in April, one of your key things is that you wanna look at performance measurements, key performance indicator. It all comes into play in terms of where, because we say, why aren't we putting someone at the midpoint? Well, that ties into performance, that ties into where you want people brought in based on years of experience. We have to go so far. Again, this is how long in any given position do we expect a person to remain in that position? If we found over the last 20 years, the average length of service has been 3 years, right? Alright, so if that's the case, that position is gonna be shifting downwards in terms of expected budgetary requirements for because we're only gonna have them for 3 years. We're gonna be kind of looping back again. Corporate world, you know that the key or the goal, anytime there's promotional opportunities or someone's coming in or you're bringing in and recruiting, is gonna be at the 50th percentile of the range. That's always the goal, right? And then of course you build from there. Rarely do you see people coming at the bottom. Usually your bottom end of those ranges are when there are deficiencies that you're bringing someone in knowing you're gonna be working toward over X amount of years or X amount of time. So we've got a lot to talk about in terms of how you wanna see that structured. But ultimately, to answer the question on ranges, it's gonna be a moving target every year. We're gonna need to present to you every year standardly is to come out and say, this is our research this year, this is where the market's trending and where we are within our comparable communities.
And one innovative approach would be to asterisk this whole thing and say that long-term incumbents, and I'll just pick a number, or that have been with the town for more than 10 years, may exceed the max. Because if you think about it, you're increasing the max because you've got a long-term employee at the max and you're giving them a COLA. Now you just increase the max. That person leaves, but the max stays up there, right? It's almost better, but very unusual, I will say, to asterisk the classification study to allow for individual long-serving incumbents to exceed the cap. Once you do that, then I start to agree with Wendy, no need to increase the cap. And in the long run, that's a better way to do it, because if you do get a new hire, your range has been moving every year and there's a tendency to put them at a midpoint, which is now higher. So my own view, you asterisk this and you allow us to and obviously there's board oversight of this as part of the budget process, right? So there's no disagreement about the appropriation and the budgeting process being the appropriate spot for you to use your oversight authority on these things. But my recommendation is that you consider changing the whole darn thing, because every time I've gotta put somebody above a cap, I'm raising the cap, and is that the best thing for the town? Not in my view, but I've never been able to, I've not seen a municipality that does that.
So that just refers back to another I'll ask this when we get to the comp, because do you have questions on the comp and classification, or do we wanna keep this merged?
I'd keep it merged because they're
Yeah.
intertwined.
Yeah. So the one one thing that I've already mentioned to you, but the implementation recommendation, which ties into the range thing, is if somebody is below the minimum, they should be raised to the minimum, right? This is for implementation of the plan. This is on their recommendations, page 12. If they're within the range for their classification, they'll be moved to the new plan at their current salary. But then they say the compensation of employees who is above the maximum compensation should remain there without a reduction and pay until the market catches up. The town can also continue to compensate this employee for exceptional performance through a bonus that is not applied to the base, even though they are outside the range. So we're basically, isn't that kind of saying, if you're above the range, we're not gonna make the range meet you, you're just gonna be above the range and you'll stay there until the range catches up? Is that kind of what that says?
Rather than increasing the range, which was to my earlier point.
So that gets to your asterisk, but
Absolutely.
it just seems like, so in this case, right now, because we're doing the timing of this, we're giving everybody the increases, not knowing if they're gonna end up above the range that we end up with. This is the point I need to.
We're increasing the range 3% is what we've done, is that correct?
For now, yeah.
That is for now.
Until we look at what their implementation, right? So it's because we're the chicken before the egg kind of thing, whatever that is.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think that to have that be a constructive conversation, you need to really understand, look at the details position by position in terms of where we are within that percentage of mean, and we need to get to that.
Okay.
And we will get there.
Yeah.
Honestly, right now, I don't know how many positions, I could guess, based on a quick view of how many positions we see kind of shifting, and that's the other piece, right? We have positions, and I'm not talking unaffiliated, I'm talking even within the affiliated ranks, where there are adjustments that are gonna be recommended. Well, okay, how many do we have? What are we really looking at dollar wise? We got look at that. But what we'll be coming back to you with is we'll highlight, so we can draw our attention to what we really need to focus on in terms of what's the impact of this. And then start to think about building our new structures around kind of where we're currently at. And part of that decision making is you're gonna come back and say, tell me what's happening within our market. So we've gotta know where their minimum maximums are too, so we're just not there.
And I don't wanna I'm not trying to screw our employees or anything. It's just, you have to, obviously, it's the public's money, we wanna treat our employees fair and give them the right salaries, but we wanna do it in terms of the market and making sure we can retain people and keep them and hire them. So it's kind of a catch-22 for us. And again, back to this classification study, we had a lot of expectations for it, and what I'm hearing is we will get those expectations met in the next couple of months or whatever. So I'm okay with that. That's why all the questions and the pushback kind of, I think, is.
No, and it's fair. We're all anxious to get that because we know where we need to be, and we'll eventually get there. The only thing that I think is also getting lost in this a little bit is I know we're focused on the unaffiliated GWIs. I think we also have to keep in mind that within what the unaffiliated employee is looking at is what's happening on the affiliated side, and what they see, right, is that if we talk GWIs on affiliate, that's only half the equation because you're getting steps, right? So those steps, you're not getting your 2.5%, 3%, you're getting 4.5%, 5% every year. And then you have unaffiliates who are sitting there saying, I'm the one working 75 hours a week as a department head, and my percentage is flat at 2.5%, right? And that goes right into retention, right? We wanna keep those high performing leadership positions in range media, and we need to recognize that. So that's a problem within any kind of wage scales when there's a compression happening at the higher ends, and how are we gonna make sure that we're keeping up with market? Because they'll jump to the corporate side, as you know, and they can
This is
bump up
the
for
deal with it,
20% right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
So that's all this we gotta kind of,
Don't tell
no, but we gotta, they already know.
I know.
Just to
Believe me, we hear it.
close this out, Wendy, I
Yeah.
just wanna remind you and thank the board again, because we did, very quickly after we got here with Eric's help and Mike Harrington, we brought to the board that legislation which did change the pension multiplier for unaffiliateds moving forward. That was effective 7/1, and it went from 2 to 1.5 or 2.5 to 2.
2.5 to 2.
Went from 2.5 to 2. And that was, we didn't need to wait for the GovHR study to do that. So that's an example of something we just did with your help and blessing right away, and that'll be years to have a big impact, but I think it put us quickly closer to what the marketplace was, because we were clearly high in that line. So,
Okay,
Thank you.
one more GWI question. This came up last year or somewhere. So I know that like we have the social worker is included in the unaffiliated, but not the social services director. And is that gonna eventually get moved to an unaffiliated position because it's a leadership position?
I'll defer to you on this. This is
You don't have to give me, but it's just.
I think we could, so we have three department heads that are currently affiliated. So with those three positions, we need to explore if that makes sense for them to, and I don't know the history, how they got there. But we do need to explore, does that make sense, and what it would mean to actually see if there's an opportunity to shift them over, and there's several things to that. There's a thing called the Subcommittee test. We have to make sure that's something that we can actually stake ahead of this, and we have to make sure that we have the ability to move them. Then does the individual wanna move, and then of course there's negotiations with the union. So, but that's part of the conversation.
No, I just, it's been on the radar, so I.
It's been on our radar as well.
Yeah, I knew it was on your radar, but it's.
Yeah.
What are the other two
These guys.
positions?
Yeah.
It's our town IT director and town clerk.
But do they report, or they don't report directly to you, or do they?
through Tom.
Okay, so they have whereas the social services reports directly to you too. So that was that's why I didn't recognize them as. Okay, so I don't know if we have any more questions, but there was a couple of motions that we made last year to move this to the full board that I was to make here. Okay, you guys ready? I'm gonna look them up, they're not in here, so what we did the last few years, and you could tell me, was we moved, we've made a recommendation at this board to recommend to the full board a 3% general wage increase for unaffiliated staff effective July 1st, 2024, pending a satisfactory yearly performance review, which I assume are done.
No, we would take that out of the motion, because it's not subject to a performance review. It's just a COLA.
So,
That's why everybody's getting the same. If it wasn't the same, then you could say it was related to a performance review, but clearly it can't be if they're all getting 3, so I would strike that from the motion.
okay, then that's not in the charter, or that somewhere that personnel, I'm just asking that people don't get their increases without a performance review. Is that written somewhere?
From my understanding, there is nothing that specifies that you need to have a performance review, a successful performance review to receive the GWI. In the past, yes, it's always been tied to once the review's been done.
Right.
Again, Mark, I'm not gonna speak, we kind of talked about conceptually how this would work for the 1 year. With the change in management and leadership. The reviews that Mark is currently providing to staff are providing a new baseline in terms of expectations. That's getting us prepared for next year when we see true performance measures being put into place. So the decision for this year was, Mark's been here for too short a time as well to provide, right? So everyone's going to look at this more of a COLA as opposed to tying it to performance. Expectations are gonna be identified through what Mark is currently doing for performance reviews. Those performance reviews are really based on setting expectations and getting somewhat to what those key performance indicators and expectations will be for next year. And kind of forego the idea of having to get that review completed before getting the GWI.
So is this, I'm hearing two different things in some ways. Is this a one-off year, or is this going forward, it's just COLA increase and it's not related to performance?
Aren't they two separate things? This is the problem that everybody struggles with. We're back to that, and that's the issue. Is that a cost of living adjustment, whatever that is, should be applied uniformly.
What if the cost of living adjustment is very low?
So be it,
Or what if it's very high?
so be it.
So I don't know, what is it, so I don't have a history of the COLA, so I don't know
It's almost as if,
what it's been in the last few years.
we can't be constrained, although we can be guided by past practice. It isn't solely about how we've done this in the past. It's gotta be partly about how you wanna do it in the future. And so we're either running management with a performance review every year, and that performance review is part of the compensation package somehow, or we're not, but you're not gonna withhold a standard cost of living adjustment.
Right, so this is a going forward motion is what I'm saying. This isn't a one-off motion because
Well,
you just.
my
We're
view
not
is
gonna make it permanent, I don't think we can make it permanent here because I'm not ready to say every year we're gonna give a COLA.
Yeah, so
Right.
that's why I'm asking, is this
Yeah,
setting a new
I think we're
precedent
just
or is
gonna,
this?
I think,
This whole thing
We're probably
transfers to the budget process next year, so next year we won't be in personnel sub doing GWIs.
well, we might do a preview in personnel sub before we send it to the full board. And I don't know yet, right?
But I do think it's, this is difficult without seeing what we're looking at with the entire budget and how this affects the budget.
Well, the 3% was already budgeted, Heather, it's already done.
I know,
It's
so
fixed.
it's like it's almost after the fact that we're,
This should have been done as part of the budget process. I can't answer why it was separated before, but it's clearly less transparent this way. It's been removed from the budget process, but the 3% that you're approving now is A, it's retro to July 1, and B, it's already been approved by your board, the full board. And so where there was a slight disagreement with Wendy and I as we've set up this meeting is, my own view is it's not necessary to vote this out of committee or vote it to the BOS. The charter requires that you have control over the ranges, not the raises. The raises are part of your budgetary approval, should be done as part of the budget, where you say, we're not giving everybody a 3%, we're giving them a 1.5. And it shifts to us to justify the COLA every year as part of the budget process. But my own view, just for the record, is that personnel sub does not need to vote on this. It's already been approved by the full board, it's been approved by the Board of Finance and by referendum. The 3% is budgeted.
but so again, what I think we can do here is move that we will move the general wage increase of 3% for the unaffiliated effective January 1st, 2023 and move it to the full board for further discussion, cause I mean,
It's 2024.
2024, sorry, I was reading.
It's a typo.
July 1st.
Yeah, July, I was just reading this one,
Okay.
but you're saying,
We approved it already,
Yeah.
so.
but we didn't approve it, we didn't approve it knowing this was what we were giving everybody, did we?
I don't wanna answer that specifically because I wanna be respectful, but if the town manager submits a budget, even if it's 50,000 pages, and the board approves it, then the board approved it. We answered on the staff side every single question and had ample time for discussion and subcommittee meeting and everything else. If what we're saying is that the board wants a special section of the budget process on this, I'm totally in agreement. But to now go back to personnel sub and seek approval and move it to the full board, the real question is, why are we doing this? But my question was, why did we do it before? And I think I'll be candid instead of just beating around the bush here.
Yeah.
I think it was done deliberately because it was post de facto and you know, it was already a fait accompli. I'm arguing with Wendy that it shouldn't be a fait accompli in the future, but it is now. And so I agree with Steve, I don't think there's a vote needed, I don't think there's a motion needed, I think it's just a discussion. And then lastly, I did say to you, Wendy, that this isn't, you know, transparent, we wanna give you everything, there's no secrets and put it all out there, public documents. But the place to approve it or not approve it is part of the budget process. If you start carving things out of the budget process, we'll be doing budget all year long.
This is a one-off. This is the part that's the one-off.
I think
And
so.
we're doing the correction already.
Okay.
If you're in agreement that we can do it as part of the budget process and
So I'm just gonna read again, the section 903, this is in the charter, which is where it comes to us, right? Right or wrong, it's in here, the salaries, wages, or other compensation of all officers and employees of the town and such employees of the Board of Education are recommended by said board shall be determined by the Board of Selectmen in conformity with a systemic pay plan for the positions involved as prepared and recommended by the town manager, except as otherwise provided by law. So it's basically saying that salaries of all we don't have elected officials. So it basically is saying that we're supposed to approve this salary. What Mark's saying is we already did it as part of the budget. My point was, it wasn't, so you're saying we didn't ask specifically at the budget, but I guess my expectation was we've always done this process, so I expected this process to happen. And if you're saying, go ahead, sure.
No, I believe the confusion is that you didn't know that was, you were
We didn't
assuming
know
that
we
this was
weren't
going to
doing this.
happen, so that's why you didn't ask the question earlier.
Exactly.
That's what I just took from that. That the reason you didn't ask earlier is because you assumed that this was going to be
The
as
same process as the last
historically
5
where you
years.
discuss it here. But now it's different because of the new
Okay,
information.
so if you guys don't feel we need to move this to the full board, I'm fine with a consensus. Because we've already approved it, is what we're saying, we've already approved it. But I don't wanna just start calling it a COLA, flat out COLA every year until we figure out what the actual dollars are every year and the merit pool and things like that, before we go forward.
totally agree, COLA could be zero, I mean, it might be no
Yeah,
COLA,
but
so
3 years ago, COLA was 8%.
Yeah, that's what I was
So
told, and we
that's-
didn't give an 8% increase.
That's why we say a COLA, not necessarily what there's a difference between COLA and the rate of inflation, obviously, but whatever you
Yeah.
decide, you are the decision makers with respect to the COLA. It can be zero, it could be whatever it is. The only point I made is that the COLA component of the overall comp should be uniform amongst the unaffiliated, just as it is uniform among the bargaining group.
Well, in that scenario, the unions had already negotiated at 4%.
That's right.
So the 8% was negated already, and that's sort of my point going forward. We'll know that information.
That's exactly
But,
right.
you know, the COLA of 8% is negated. We sort of need to refer to what our
Yeah.
contracts are elsewhere.
Wendy, if I can, if you just read that to me, I know you emailed it to me, but what does it say about the Board of Education? Because I'm just curious, if I was in your chair, I'd ask that question too, well, why isn't there a Board of Selectmen approval of BOE salaries?
It
What does
says
it say?
the salaries, wages of other compensation of all officers and all employees of the town and such employees of the board are as recommended by said board shall be
Okay, so-
determined. So again, this was quoted in the last year, again, if we were doing things wrong, that's why I was looking for Tom, cause you guys have been here every year, so
Yeah.
I wanted the history onto why we were doing this. This is
We-
where
we-
Mark
we-
and I got into it.
We were doing it wrong is my
Okay,
focus,
so-
but-
So anyway, if you're saying if we're all good with this is already it's basically a done deal. There's no performance reviews. I'm hoping that there's nowhere in here that says we had to have that before we do this. That's the only thing I'm saying is I can't research everything right now. I'm going by historically, we've been told we had to do this at the personnel sub, move it to the full board. We're saying that is wrong. We don't need to do that. And they've already been given the GWI of 3% this year, and that we'll revisit the plan next year.
Well, just to be clear, we didn't give it to them yet out of respect for the past practice. We didn't go ahead and increase
So
it.
people haven't gotten their increases yet?
No, we don't believe we need approval of this board. It's already been granted. But out of respect for the past practice, we have not yet implemented the PAFs.
So do you need approval then from us?
I do not need approval. I just, out of respect, we didn't just go ahead and do it and then defend the decision to do it. We wanted to have
Okay.
this conversation.
So what will be the next steps on getting more detail on the merit pool, what that will all look like, and going forward in the budget, what are we looking at for, will we have a section where we can specifically
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
to this
In the
going forward,
Poughkeepsie-
and it's not just blended in?
In the Poughkeepsie budget, management salaries are on page 4, broken out. Because it's obviously it's a subject that needs to be transparent completely, and the best way to do that is to just have a separate page in the budget.
Okay, so now I'm kind of gonna run out of time here, cause
Oh, sorry.
I don't wanna put on, so I think what we said here is the personnel subcommittee feels this is already included in the budget, we don't feel like we need to move it to the full board. I'll go with consensus on that one, I may disagree, but I'll just go with consensus of my peers who I trust. That before the budget process, we'd be looking for Mark to come to personnel sub with kind of the proposal of what we plan to do as far as, and now we'll have the full comp and classification study at that point in time, so we know where we are. We'll know where, to come to us with what the proposed increase potentially is and how the merit base pool will work with that to see where we're gonna impact the budget as a preliminary at this level. And then that would go to the full board, either, for the budget process really, to see what they think.
With ample time to go back and forth too, so
Yeah.
it's not a last minute,
Yeah.
here it is, yes.
Yeah, we would need preview, that's something we could talk about here. So on that, I think, can we move on? I'm sorry if my stomach's growling, but I'm hungry and they're making pancakes at home that I'm missing. Raspberry pancakes.
You had to share that with me, I'm
Yeah.
starved.
Raspberry pancakes from our garden. So we've covered items 2, and I believe that we've added a few, the concerns for item 3. So we're gonna move into the town manager goals, and we just got them this morning, so we haven't even had a chance to read them. And so we can go through them. I may not be able to stay for the whole thing here, and I will defer to you guys. But if you could kind of give
Kick
a
us off, sure.
high level.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Wendy. So again, this document is a draft. I'm realizing you're seeing it for the first time, but it's just a discussion, points of discussion for our meeting this morning. We're gonna work to finalize it prior to the next personnel sub-meeting and then ask you to formally bless it. So while you're seeing it for the first time today, you've got a month or more to recommend any edits, particularly with respect to things we didn't include or failed to include. And so I just wanna say at the outset how much I appreciate the support of the board and all of the town employees and staff who have supported me here in the position since I started back on January 8th. As you'll see in the draft document, the first thing we're starting with in section A is to emphasize what the Board of Selectmen goals are that we all worked on together, and I think that final product is just fantastic. And so you see as my number one goal, it's very simple, is to implement and facilitate the implementation of all of your goals. So you have 8 key areas, and within each of those you've got a number of sub-goals. By direct incorporation, all of your goals become my goals, our shared goals, and that's why those are listed as A throughout the document, and we don't have to go through each one. I just wanna emphasize that the things that are on the list are meant to be illustrative of the sorts of things that we're working on that are my goals and that are supported by the town managers office staff. I wanna thank Eric, of course, who's here, who will be moving into a new HR role. Franklin, who is here, has been elevated also, and Tom Fitzgerald, my deputy, who couldn't be with us today. So that is the team behind the town manager's office. As you know, Eric will be transitioning out as he takes on the new duties of HR director that this board approved. Will also be, and you see in the document we talk about this, that one of our objectives is to migrate the HR administrative functions that are currently being performed by the deputy town manager and migrate them to the new position of generalist. And again, I'm not taking these in any order, I'm just giving you the broad strokes. But so when we talk about the goals of the town manager, you look at the support, the direct support that the town manager has. The deputy town manager, obviously Franklin in his key position. Eric will be moving, we'll say down the hall. We are gonna have an intern, just to let you know, the new intern has been chosen and No. And he starts when, Franklin?
August something, Tom knows, I don't.
Okay, so sometime in late August. We've been without our intern for a couple months, as you know, Jess moved on. So those are the resources in my office that we have available to support your goals and to also work on the goals that you see listed there that are my own. So migrating some of Tom, the deputy's duties to the generalist is gonna be vital as we lose Eric. So I'm just gonna take questions generally. Again, the document is really just in an initial draft form. You can see the categories there. I'll just say briefly that category B was really about the first 6 months or so. I know at this point that's largely behind us. Some of those items are still ongoing. But obviously, as your new town manager, my own number one goal was to get up to speed, for lack of a better expression, as quickly as I could. That involved meeting stakeholders, external and internal. One of the things that was really, really good about the timing of my entrance, if you will, is that we were just starting the budget process. And so that threw me in the deep end, and because of that, it enabled me to really get to know our department heads, our division heads, and to understand the budget, which is I think the best way to get up to speed on what the organization is doing and is able to do is through its fiscal strength and its budgeting process. So as part of my first 6 months here, I was heavily engaged in budget work that involved a lot of internal work with department heads and staff, but at the same time I'm out in the community attending civic events and trying to meet as many members of the community. And I still haven't completed that. I mean, there's still members of boards and commissions who I've never met, and I mean I could be doing the whole year, but we have to draw a line somewhere. I think hopefully you'll agree I've done a good job at kind of spreading myself out there at the same time as the budget process. So your goals are A, and B is pretty straightforward as it says there, onboarding and community outreach, leveraging the annual budget process to build a full understanding of the organization and personnel. I've included it in the goals because we first started on this, as Wendy knows, a few months ago. But since that's largely completed, when we get to a final draft, we could omit it or we could just indicate that we've met those objectives. And so C, which is, just spend a minute on this, is one of the chief and most important elements of what we're all working on together, which is the fiscal health of the organization, our need to mitigate future tax increases, government efficiency, and again, that's the subheading, and underneath it are just some things that are illustrative of the types of things that specifically we would do within that. And section D is a really important one to me. We can have a talk about it for a few minutes. I think it kind of ties to what we've already talked about in terms of staff, HR, the GovHR study. But the heading is internal team development, human resources, and organizational change. You know, again, thanks to the approvers of creating HR and understanding the importance of moving it out of the town manager's office, because under here are a whole number of things that are gonna be instrumental in making the internal organization stronger. And Eric can speak to some of those, but I think the main thing to me is implementing the new HR module in Munis and streamlining the internal process. And then you want a question, or I'm almost done?
Yeah, so I'm gonna
Oh, you
leave
are?
these guys here to follow up.
Let me just finish with E if I can.
Yeah.
E is promote a new level of strategic planning for town boards and commissions. I would like to get some feedback on this, because if the board doesn't want me to do this, I'd like to know that, because it does take me a little bit out of the lane of a conventional town manager. But it seemed to me in my initial 6 months here that we can do more in a number of ways there. And then F, very quickly, is a lot of the things that Wendy and I have talked about and worked with, all of the public facing documents, updating the website, all of these things that uplift the entire organization and provide better transparency and better access to services to our constituents are all talked about in section F. The items in G, where G, the headline is serve as the town's chief negotiator. All of those items are interspersed with the other categories, but I wanted to break them out just so that the board has a complete understanding of my role as the chief negotiator, all of the agreements that we're working on, from the ambulance folks to the SIMPAC and so forth. And then lastly is H, by no means is this the least important, it's everything taxes. And there's room to expand this, I know with your comments, but just to wrap it up, there's a number of tax policies that are important. And obviously the overarching one is to mitigate future tax increases. That's why we're looking for your support to allow us to get a little bit out of our lane and work with partners, because at the end of the day, our taxpayers are paying one tax bill. And that's what's important, not so much what is municipal and what is Board of Ed. And so under section 8, you've got a few things, the senior exemption, the farm exemption. We already did one of these, not the ambulance, who did we already do? Oh, the firefighter, already did that, and that's all I had, Wendy, I know you gotta run.
I gotta run,
Yeah.
so I'm gonna turn this over to the deputy.
Thank you very much,
The
Wendy.
deputy and Mike here.
Enjoy.
Enjoy.
I do a couple, I'm gonna say this as I walk out, and I
Yeah.
think they're in here, but one of my big things that I really wanna see is like an increased level of professionalism from the staff on follow through. There's been a couple instances where we've had to ask, we've said it with people at the table and it didn't happen, the agenda, and there was something else, and we shouldn't have, that should be in a corporate environment, you don't ask, you hear it and you deliver it, you don't ask twice. And also upgrading the level of documentation on things, like a lot of times we'll get something and all the dollar amounts are just embedded in like a giant amount of text. And if you were presenting that to a board or commission, you'd see it in an Excel document, in a chart or table and things like that. I think you have that generally in there, but that was the one thing that I have. And then just one other thing that I'm gonna say is that somewhere in here, we need to say something that we're gonna hold you somewhat to no new hires, like we've given you the staff in the last budget that you said you needed to be successful, and that the attempt at our next budget is that we're not hiring any more administrative staff. So I think you would take that one on, would you, Heather? And so with that, I bid you adieu.
Thank you very much, Wendy.
And I will listen or follow up since we're recorded, or you guys could fill me in, alright? So here's the gavel.
Yeah, where's the gavel?
I didn't bring it. I'll see you guys, thanks for letting me,
Have a wonderful
Thanks.
vacation, Wendy, well deserved, thank you for everything.
Bye,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
have fun, Steve.
Yeah, likewise.
I think because we only just received in trying to
Oh,
skim
yeah.
it as we were
Yep.
as you were
Next
talking,
month,
I
we'll
think
talk
it's
about this next month.
kind of difficult right now to
Yeah.
dive into this
Yeah.
without having some time to look through it
And do you have the rough draft? There was another rough draft in town manager goals, it set up more in an Excel document. Do you have that? I can share it with you if not, I want to. But my point is, I do wanna merge what was on that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Well, there's a couple of things. We're not eager to merge the prior town manager's goals. There's a
Right.
spreadsheet floating around there from the Maria days. But there's also some work that
That's not what I'm talking about.
yeah, there's also one that we kind of worked on just as I was getting here. It was a transition document with Lee. Franklin has it. I think that's the one you're talking about. And that's a really great document, but just, let you know that Wendy's view, I believe, was that that was more of a task list and that it was
This sort of reads
is it,
like
right.
a backfill document.
Yeah. I mean, we can include it or we can move things from that into however you guys,
It's good, goals are always the first two things, they have to be reasonable and attainable.
achievable, right? I mean,
So you've already achieved quite a few of these.
some of these are, they're
more-
already done.
A couple, I think goals should also be forward thinking, and a lot of these are present or past tense, which is great that you've accomplished them.
Uh-huh.
But I just on the quick blush I've had at looking at it,
Yeah,
I'd like to set the goals for the second half of the year.
sure.
And my other concern, just right off the bat, was the first line says, Board of Selectmen goals January 24th through to December 25th. To be frank, I'm not sure where those dates came from, but it should probably coordinate, rather be in sync with the selectmen terms.
Well, usually it's because we do a year-end review, which usually takes
Oh, is that,
place.
Isn't this,
Yes,
With your term?
2025, yeah.
well, no, because selectmen's term ends in November and begins in December.
oh, I didn't know that. I just assumed it was December.
After
December,
election,
usually
the
around
first,
December 4th it changes. So you're
yeah,
still.
when the first meeting is.
Well, I mean, I can change it to
December.
November. It meant to be, and I think Wendy's goal this is your goal, so I think her direction was that it should be for your term, exactly
Yeah.
what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's the length of the
The
term,
goals for the term, but
December 20.
we usually do a year-end review,
But my
the town
point is
manager
that
each year as
new,
well.
we should almost resync it, cause the new board, if there is a new board, would have no basis for holding the town manager accountable to the goals when they just got into office 30 days prior. You know what I mean by that?
Well, then the new board will set their new goals.
Right, well, I guess that actually negates my thing. Mine is looking back and seeing if the goals were fulfilled. They should almost be broken apart. One is, did you fulfill the goals for the past year? But the new board should put down what their priorities, like you say, letter A is your number one, and that's gonna change on December 4th or thereabouts.
But here, and I'm following you on that, Steve, but your goals are by your own desire, 2 years. So I thought as I framed these goals,
Interesting.
I should be in sync with you because your goals are multi-year. In fact, that's why they're such good goals. You couldn't achieve half of those in 1 year. We're already halfway through. So I wanted to match my time period to your time period. My number one goal is to implement yours. By the time you leave office, I mean, you won't, some of these will succeed you obviously, but with respect to a number of them, you wanna be able to check those boxes that you accomplished that, right? Same thing with me, but I know where you're going, and that is that the charter requires an annual performance review of the town manager. And how's that? I don't think they're two mutually exclusive, like you could evaluate me based on our progress on the 2-year goals as opposed to did you do everything for a 1-year period, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense.
Right, but I look at when we do that review, I would imagine that we also would reassess your goals to some extent just based on how that review came out in different areas.
It's a
And
working
also,
document, I agree.
the challenges and the different challenges and different things that come up in the town, that's always moving. So in some ways, you can have the broad goals that meet our
Yeah.
selectmen goals, but the specific goals that we have for the town manager, I see shifting as these next 2 years progress.
And I think you'll see, as you have time to explore this over the next month or so, that some of the specifics in there are broader, more than 1 year, and some are very specific, like implement certain things and achieve certain things are likely to be done by the end of the year. For example, the housing report that's coming out of the Housing Policy Committee that the Board of Selectmen created in in February is due to you according to this in January, right? So that's a specific objective that we're working on already, and we hope to meet that timeline. And there's some other examples through there. Others are just broader, like the effort to mitigate future tax increases is an ongoing goal. It permeates everything we're doing. It needs to be on the goal list. I don't know how you evaluate it though, it's how, it depends on when you do the performance review, but our commitment, at least my commitment, is that we're gonna follow the Board of Finance guidance. And I made that comment at the Board of Finance meeting recently where, again, give us the guidance and we're gonna meet that however we do it, and we'll get it done. So if they say tax increases cannot be more than X on the municipal side, that's the goal.
So yeah, I mean, when I look at A, facilitate the goals of the Board of Selectmen, which those are 2-year goals, but when I look at this document, I think this is a moving document, and I definitely think that when we do the
Change.
performance review, that it also gets
Yep.
looked
And there's
at.
certain things too, I think, where you particularly as personnel sub can be really helpful is help prioritize things, right? Because as I've been putting things on this list for 2 months, I can continue to give myself things to do, but where you could be really helpful is, well, what are the real priorities here if you want me to dedicate? And then your performance review of me is not so much, well, did I get any of these goals done, but did I meet your specific goals, right? It's not my goals, I'm just giving you a list of the broad, some are more specific than others, but I agree with Wendy. The boards gave us the tools we need to be successful, that's absolutely true. We accept the challenge to mitigate tax increases. We embrace the need for innovation and efficiencies throughout the organization. And I welcome your evaluation of our success, not just mine, but really the team that supports me on all of those key metrics, right? The key metrics are really maybe a little different from the goals. Here's the goals broadly, those are the goals, but where you could maybe rather than editing the goals, you give me a 1-pager back of key priorities or give me some guidance on the priorities. We can always add work to do to our slates. And I think this goes to what Wendy said. She said, she doesn't really want a list of tasks so much as she'd like to see the broader picture of what we're working on as a team. So, if that makes sense.
We'll have to discuss that when Wendy's present. We definitely need this on next month's, cause I'll be honest, I differ.
Oh,
I think goals should be specific, reasonable, and attainable.
okay.
Whereas what you're inferring, if I'm understanding correctly, is more of a goal-oriented approach, meaning a sort of conceptual.
Right.
I like to have defined
I think it's easier to measure.
It is
Yeah.
and it's a spectrum, right? So obviously one of the goals has to be from the town manager, I think, has to be, the organizational health, morale, these things, those broad, not easy to measure, right? Are we leading an organization that is working more cohesively, more collaboratively? Have we made the right shifts to make it work a little better? It's hard to measure that, right? But if you say, I'm asking you to find $1 million in savings for next year's budget, go find it. We're gonna,
I stop at one.
well, that's it.
And I don't see why we can't do both. He can have a goal-oriented aspirational with specific goals
I think this is more aspirational, which is great, but I think the 1-pager that you alluded to is where we can, dial it in to specific thresholds specific achievements, if you will. But the altruistic, conceptual, big picture.
The holistic picture.
This has a component, and I think that both components are valid, especially for reviewing a mid-step, since we're here for 2 years or more.
But I think in addition, when you have just conceptual goals, it's like with anything, you need that outline underneath of this is how we're going to
Specific.
reach these goals, and I think that
Right.
the task can actually be helpful in that.
I couldn't agree more. I totally agree. I had one thing that I should have mentioned when Wendy was here in all the discussions I had, but I get your feedback on this. So the charter does indicate that the one individual salary that you control directly as opposed to range is mine. And so in the past, as Wendy alludes to, we did this way, the town manager's salary was never on the list. And was never acted on, which would make no sense to me either. So on the list, and we put this out there, it's a public document, I included the town manager's salary in there. And absent some objection, I'd get the same 3% as everyone else, but I wanna be transparent about that. And I don't know what happened in the past, why the town manager's salary wasn't there. Obviously, it's negotiated as part of the contract, but I think my contract says I get whatever everybody else gets. So I just wanted to put it in the record that, we're for transparency's sake, that the town manager is getting the 3% raise, the same as everyone else. And wanted that included in the minutes, so that's all.
One of the things I noticed that was not, and maybe I just missed it, again, I just breezed through this. What component you would play in the town charter revision, which for personally
Great question, Steve, and I'm gonna leave that for you to decide. I don't wanna overstep. I did send an email, I think I might have shared it with you, to Bob D and asked him, what role does the town manager have, and more importantly, what role should the town manager have, right? So he hasn't formally answered that yet. I could remind him. I said in that email that I'd like to be ex officio or at least involved, because from my perspective, it isn't about the form of government or any of that, that's out. But the last charter change, it was Bob's own words, I think, a hybrid, or whether you took one step but not the full step when you shifted to a town manager form of government. What's happened is that throughout the code and our local laws and local ordinances, they were not changed to match the intent of the charter change. Personnel this whole issue we had today about the GWIs and everything's not, and Wendy cited a section from the charter that was not changed, and it should have been. And it even refers to your authority over Board of Education salaries, which even in the past practice never came before you, which was the point I was gonna make, and then we were running out of time, so I didn't. But so a long-winded way of saying, Steve, I'd like to be involved. I have a lot of experience. Hartford changed their charter just as I got there, and there's some really good things that they did. Poughkeepsie changed to a strong mayor form of government just a few months before I got there, and then I had the privilege of serving as mayor there. So in both of the big organizations I worked at prior to coming here, right on the heels of a charter change. So I would love to be involved. I think, and I don't wanna speak for any member of the board, but I did not put it on my goals because I thought it would be overstepping. I don't have a role in the policy making decisions of the board, but I offer my services administratively.
I mean, I was not obviously involved in the past charter revision, and there's a lot there that I would need to get spun up on exactly
I'd love to put you on the commission.
how members were chosen last year. But I just wonder, is there some sort of, would there be a conflict of interest with our town manager being involved in the charter revision? I don't know, it's just a question that I have. I don't know.
As long as there's no voting or authority, I don't believe so. So ex officio.
Oh, then you're not, yeah.
I'm not a member. I'm not asking to be appointed. But having a support role or at least having a seat at the table, I'd have the opportunity to let the commission know the reasons you might not wanna do. The risk of charter review is not, it always starts well intended, best intentions in the world. It's what they don't know. And so you're taking members of the public who frankly have very little experience in public administration. And this is why you get these things. And I've gone so far as to say that your first town manager, regardless of all of the background, I think, let me put this another way. GovHR and others would never say to me as a candidate, be the first town manager in a newly created town manager form of government because of the challenges that any new first town manager. So there was an opportunity that I could have had to be the first city manager in Syracuse or something like that. I'm not interested because there's just so many challenges because the charter changes are never correct. And what happens is you change, and Poughkeepsie did it too, changed the charter but never changed the code. And now the charter trumps the code. classic example of, well, they didn't do their homework, so.
Well, I think, and obviously this isn't an agenda item, so
No.
with the charter, but I think with us determining whether we're opening and what will happen with that, I do think that prior to us making that decision, that we do need some sort of agenda item of fully understanding, have Bob D on and fully understand the process, what it entails, and is it a certain scope of the charter that's open, is the full charter open? I just think there are a lot of questions that our board will have, and it would be helpful if we had something like that. But again, this isn't an agenda item, so.
Well, it is, the question is, why isn't it on my goals? So it's a legitimate discussion, and I think the key is, if you'd like me to include any component of that in my goals, I will, but I'm happy to support the effort if you decide to do it. I can answer your question, having talked to Bob, the board has an obligation to review by the end of this year whether you want to or not. You have to, at a minimum, there has to be an agenda item. So you're gonna have that opportunity. Bob D would be on. And there'd be also an opportunity for public comment. And then the last thing I'll say is that, and Bob confirmed this, that you can set the guardrails. These are the things we want the commission to look at, but you can't prevent them from leaving and expanding the scope. That's the risk of establishing the commission. You're ultimately the approvers of whatever report. If you don't like their report, as I think I sent to Steve from Bob T, you can send it back once. And then, but if they just say, thanks very much, here it is again, then you have to vote it up or down.
Yeah, you can vote it down.
Yeah, you can vote it
But
down.
then you have to start all the way back the 15-month window. But that, to my knowledge, which is not very good, has ever not been accepted, the charter revisions. Most of them are really not flagrant, but really black and white, like mismatched, disconnected couplings. But being in charge of this meeting, let's bring it back into the scope of town manager. I apologize, I'm the one that pushed it outside of
Not at
our
all.
agenda. In the interest of time and with the knowledge that this is definitely on our next agenda, is there any other questions you have about what we've received today or
No,
preparation you'd like them to do before the meeting?
So, I would like to say, I've been very happy to have you here and appreciate all of the work that you've done. You've really
We're having
got
fun.
out and running, and I appreciate this. I will have questions, I just, need to absorb it and go
Gotcha.
through it, and I think we all do, and with Wendy not here as
Do
well.
you have the one from, I'm not sure,
We can recirculate it.
Yeah.
but that Excel one, do you have that I speak of? Are you familiar with that? Or I can share it.
I have it somewhere, but I don't know, I tried to do a quick search, so I'll look and
Yeah,
see
Frank, but
as
can you
well.
resend it to us? Since Tom's not here, or kick it up to Tom?
I'm not
he's
even
the one I
email
think
deleter,
that
so I definitely
initially-
have it, but
Yeah, no, I agree, and that way Wendy gets it too, just so it's more.
And I would just say thank you both, because I know I've had conversations with you off and on about different things that are priorities and objectives that you want us to work on. So, and I've had this conversation with Wendy, so I'm not speaking out of school. Any of you are encouraged, and all of you are encouraged, just shoot us an email and let wanna see something on this? I mean, we don't have to wait for another meeting. Any questions, shoot me an email. I'm looking for suggestions and feedback too, because I think there's some things on there that probably don't even need to be on there, and then we can maybe make it a little less broad.
Well, in the, our last
Yeah.
board meeting in executive session, which I'll leave that as just acknowledged as executive session, there's certain components that might want to be implemented into your goals as far as research.
And I didn't put it in there because it was in executive session, but yeah, that's a great point, because that's a lot of work too, and we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty of that issue. And as Wendy said, it's a living document, because things come up. But again, we've got a terrific team. I think we can accomplish anything that you ask us to focus on. We have the resources to do it, so we'll get your tax stuff done and you know, whatever we
Grow
can
the
do.
green list, figure it out.
Yes.
We're trying to grow the grand list. We asked, I think I copied you, or maybe not you, Steve, but we asked George to
I got it.
yeah, did you, Wendy, if Wendy puts him on the agenda. And so you'll have an opportunity not just to talk to George about the potential moratorium, but encourage you to ask him some questions about development. You know, he gave EDC an update, or he is giving them an update. And I know you're in that room, Steve, so but I'm happy with George is doing a great job, I must say. So making progress.
Well, you packed up, so do you wanna make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion, so we
Was that
stand
obvious?
adjourned. Thank you guys,
Thank you
appreciate it.
very much for the time today. I know we went a little over.